Welcome to the Retirement Made Easy podcast, a show created to be your go-to source for straightforward retirement advice. Best of all, it is presented in a language that you can understand. Are you ready for some straight talk on retirement planning without all the fluff? Well, you found the right podcast. Here's your host, certified financial planner, Greg Gonzalez.
Hey, welcome to Retirement Made Easy. I'm Greg Gonzalez. This is episode number 190, if you're counting. This episode, we're going to focus on Social Security. And in fact, on this episode, I'm going to answer as many questions as I possibly can about Social Security, some that have been submitted to the podcast, some that were asked during some seminar presentations on Social Security that we did recently, some that were emailed in, other questions came in client meetings this past year, and some of these questions are even situational, which is fun. So this entire episode is going to deepen your knowledge of Social Security and how it impacts your retirement planning. Social Security is such a deep topic. I could talk about it for probably 5 hours straight, and I wouldn't even scratch the surface. But this episode, we are going to answer all these questions, and hopefully you're going to learn a lot about Social Security and a lot more than you knew prior to tuning into this podcast. And here's what I do know. Anytime we host a Social Security workshop at a library here in St. Louis, Missouri, and the surrounding area, the room is always packed. We recently did one a couple of weeks ago, and the first night we did Tuesdays and Thursdays from 6 to 7 p.m. Tuesday, it was standing room only. Thursday, it actually rained, and anytime you do a presentation, a workshop like that, whenever it rains, nobody wants to leave their house. So attendance was probably 60% of what it was on Tuesday when we had bright sunshine and everything was looking good outside. And I had a lot of reactions when we gave the last workshop. Some people said, gosh, I didn't realize Social Security was this complicated. Other people said, gosh, it just seems like there's so many moving parts to Social Security. But this is the Retirement Made Easy podcast, so we're going to try to make Social Security benefits easier to understand. And the more we understand something, the better the decisions we can make. Okay, so I'm going to jump into all these questions here in a minute. But before I do, I wanted to remind everybody, we've got a YouTube channel. It's called Retirement Made Easy. Now, with the YouTube channel, all the podcasts are released. And it's a blank screen when you listen to the podcast, so you don't get to watch me moving my hands and all that. But we also have videos based on different topics, from Roth conversions to Social Security planning. And these are lively videos. In some instances, I actually share my screen and go through retirement plans. And there's really a lot that you can learn from our Retirement Made Easy YouTube channel. So if you haven't already, check that out. We're going to release videos once a week. I really started to ramp up not only the content for this podcast, but also the YouTube component called Retirement Made Easy. So if you haven't already, check that out, because there's a lot of content that we're going to talk about and share on that YouTube channel, and I don't want you to miss out. And then the last thing I'll mention is I've got retirement resources that are available, like a tax guide, women's guide to a successful retirement, my retirement secret sauce. Those are all available on our website, retirestrongfa.com. And for those people that are interested in working with our team at Retire Strong, we will start accepting new clients again in late July. So if you're interested, again, our website, retirestrongfa.com, you can fill out the form and get started with a conversation with us that way. Okay, so this episode, we're going to talk about nothing but Social Security planning and a lot of people want to know how they can maximize their benefits or really better understand the choices of filing at a certain age. Now, one thing I'll mention about Social Security is there was a big change called the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2015. That was 10 years ago, and it really removed some strategies, some loopholes in the Social Security system, like file and suspend and filing a restricted application. We used to be able to really come up with some fancy strategies that could really boost people's lifetime Social Security benefits. And those were put to a halt with the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2015. So I know Social Security is complicated, but it used to be a lot more complicated. There used to be more strategies at our fingertips. And sometimes these changes can take away some of the features and the options that we have. And that Bipartisan Budget Act of 2015 certainly did. So first question that we had was actually from a new client of our firm, Retire Strong Financial Advisors. This gentleman actually told my team that he asked a question about his Social Security benefits to his former advisor. And the advisor says, "I don't know. Why don't you call Social Security? I'm not a Social Security expert." That comment just really made my blood boil a little bit, just because Social Security planning is a part of what we do as financial planners. And in fact, I would argue if you're working with people that are 55 and older, understanding how Social Security is going to impact the rest of their life, not only from retirement income planning, but to tax savings and withdrawal strategies. It is such an integral part of everything that we do. But I shouldn't be too upset about it that his former advisor didn't understand Social Security, because he ended up looking for a firm like ours that does. And in fact, we just spent about $1,000 on Social Security training just to make sure we were up to speed on everything Social Security. In my eyes, it was well worth the investment. So this guy's question was very, very good. He said he was 65 years old, was going to retire mid-year through 2026. That was his plan anyway. And he said his income the first 6 months of the year would be well above the Social Security earnings test limit, which for 2025 is $23,400. For every $2 you make above that limit, they withhold $1 in your Social Security benefits. So his thinking was, gosh, if I'm going to make $50,000 in the first 6 months of the year, I'm going to be well above that limit. And again, he's 65 years old, so he's under full retirement age. He said he'd be probably better off waiting until January 1st of the following year to start his Social Security benefit. Well, here's the answer to that. The income that you make, they look at the income you make while you're collecting your benefit. If he ceases working July 1st, all the income that he made the first 6 months of the year before he started his Social Security benefit will not apply towards that $23,400 limit. And in fact, when he claims his benefit, they will ask him how much he plans on making in earned income over the next year. So this guy's going to be totally fine. That $23,400 limit is in place. It's the earnings test, and it's for people that are working and have employment income while they're collecting their benefit. In this gentleman's situation, his earnings were all before the Social Security benefit started, and they won't be applied towards that $23,400 limit. So he's fine. Now, his other question was, what about his wife? His wife was going to continue to work for another year, and his concern was, would her earnings impact his Social Security benefit and that earnings test? And the answer is no. So anything that his wife makes would not impact his Social Security benefit. And the only way that your spouse's income would impact your Social Security benefit would be in the instance where you were claiming a spousal add-on. And I know that's getting into the weeds, but that's the truth. If you're just claiming your own benefit, like he was planning on doing, his wife's employment income would not reduce his Social Security benefit, and it would not be subject to that earnings test. And for those of you that are unfamiliar, for the people collecting Social Security while they're working, once you hit your full retirement age, the month you hit your full retirement age, that earnings test goes away. So you can make as much money as you want with earned income, and it won't reduce your Social Security benefit whatsoever. And I actually just did a YouTube video on this topic. So if you want to learn more, go ahead and watch that video. That is one of the most popular questions that we get, not only from clients, prospective clients, podcast listeners. It's working while collecting your Social Security benefit, almost by far. The next popular question, and I have probably a dozen questions in some way, shape, or form, are in regards to spousal benefits or ex-spousal benefits. So to be eligible for a spousal benefit on your ex-spouse, you would have been married to that person for 10 years or more. And the other thing is you would have had to be divorced for at least 2 years before you would be eligible for the spousal benefit. And this next question, it comes from a workshop attendee, and they were actually going through a divorce and were collecting their spousal benefit, and they were not married to this person, to their current spouse, for 10 years or more. Their question was, when I get divorced, do I get to keep the spousal benefit? And the answer is no. Unfortunately, once you get divorced at that point, that month, the spousal benefit would go away. And it's actually called a spousal add-on. You would maintain your own benefit at that point. But that's a good question. And the next question was, how do they figure all that out when it comes to an ex-spouse? I would highly, highly recommend that you book an appointment, you schedule an appointment at your local Social Security office. They're going to ask you to go in there with your marriage certificate, your divorce decree, all your documentation you want to have on hand. And one person asked, how do they know? How do they tell if you were married to that person for 10 years or more? They look at the marriage certificate and then they say they add on 10 years, and they look at the divorce decree and they say, hey, was this person legally divorced before or after that 10-year clock? That's what they do. That's what they look at. The next question was a very, very situational question, but hopefully it'll explain how this survivor benefit works. The lady said she was 67 years old, just turned full retirement age, and she was looking at her own benefit and then looking at her widow benefit, which was also known as her survivor benefit. And so she was asking, what do I do here? And I said, what's your husband's benefit? And she had her husband's statement. We were able to determine that his benefit, his PIA, which is the primary insurance amount, that's the husband's benefit at his full retirement age, was $2,800. But her own benefit at 67 was actually $3,000. So she said, gosh, it looks like this survivor benefit's not going to do me any good because it's less than my own benefit. No, 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 no. So she can actually get the survivor benefit at your full retirement age. You can get 100% of your spouse's PIA, the primary insurance amount, so she would collect the $2,800. In doing so, that allows her own benefit to grow 8% for the next 3 years. So her $3,000 a month benefit would grow to $3,720 per month. So again, the next 3 years, she would collect her survivor benefit, her widow benefit, at $2,800 a month. And then in 3 years, then she would go back to Social Security and say, hey, I'm ready to switch over to my own benefit. And she would get those deferral credits. And then it would be $3,720 a month. So the most you're ever going to get with the survivor benefit is the amount 100% of your spouse's PIA, and that's at your full retirement age. In this lady's case, she was 67. She was at that mark and could really, really benefit here by starting with the survivor benefit and switching to her own later on. And in doing so, 8% a year times 3 is 24% plus cost of living raises during that time. So it was really going to work out well for her. And that's an important point. A lot of times, the spouse with the bigger benefit, a lot of times it'll make sense to delay the bigger one because it's going to be the last benefit standing. And you want to delay the bigger of the two benefits in a lot of instances. Again, everybody's situation's different, but a lot of times that's a good strategy. The next question was a very situational one as well. I had a lady that was a retired teacher, and she was ineligible for Social Security benefits due to the fact that she received a teacher's pension, and there was what was called the GPO or the WEP, the windfall elimination provision, where teachers, firefighters, police officers, some government workers that were receiving a pension that were not paying into Social Security. These were provisions that really reduced the Social Security amount that they could receive. Just recently, the Social Security Fairness Act came into play and it wiped those out. It got rid of those. So she received a big lump sum check and she wanted to know what that was all about. That lump sum was basically a retroactive payment back to January of 2024. And basically what Social Security did was they looked at this lady and said, okay, due to the Social Security Fairness Act, now she retroactively received Social Security benefits that she should have received. And now moving forward, she will be receiving the Social Security benefits without any reduction. Now, the next question, it really had me stumped. To be honest, I've never been asked this question before, but that's why I'm a lifetime learner. And I'm a librarian, not a library. I know where to find the information. But this question, again, never been asked this question before. But this person had a question about their spouse being incarcerated. And would their spouse's Social Security benefit stop? And would their spousal benefit stop? So I actually had to look this up. I didn't know it. I think I'm humble enough to admit that I don't know everything. To answer this lady's question, yes, you do stop receiving. Social Security benefits are suspended whenever someone is incarcerated, but spousal benefits do continue. And the other important point to note here is that you do have to continue to make Medicare Part B premiums while you're incarcerated. Even though the Medicare won't cover you while you're incarcerated, the prison system actually handles that. But if you stop making your Medicare Part B premiums, then there's penalties for re-enrollment. A fun fact of the day. I hope no one listening to this podcast is ever incarcerated and this information applies to them, but I guess you never know. And you know, it's funny, and because sometimes you got to laugh a little bit. When this lady asked her question, she said that her husband was in the pen. And I had never heard that expression before. I was like, what's the pen? And she said, oh, he's incarcerated. He's in prison. But then I got to thinking, I'm like, yeah, I think I have heard that expression before, like in a movie or something. But anyway, it made me chuckle nonetheless. The next question was couple. Husband claimed his benefit at 64. He claimed it early. Wife is 2 years younger at 62. She claimed her benefit as early as possible. Years go by. And husband passes away 10 years later. He's now 74. Wife is 72. And she was concerned about her survivor benefit. Would they penalize her because she claimed her Social Security benefit as early as 62 and husband claimed his benefit at 64? Would her survivor benefit be penalized? And the answer is no. In that example, husband passes away at 74. While his wife is 72 years old, she would basically get his higher benefit as her survivor benefit. I think it would be brutal if they reduced the survivor benefit for a 72-year-old. Now, the survivor benefit is reduced if you're a widow or widower prior to turning full retirement age. For example, the survivor benefit starts as early as 60, but it is greatly reduced if you start your survivor benefit at 60. But that was a great question that we received. The next question comes from a podcast listener that was confused about ex-spousal benefits. They were married to their first spouse for 14 years, got divorced. A couple of years went by. Then they got remarried to someone else, was married to that person for 12 years, and they're divorced again. And at this point, they have not remarried. So their question is, do they get to pick which ex-spouse they claim spousal benefits on and survivor benefits on? The answer is yes. And of course, you would pick the higher of the two. So the other alternative is they could say, oh, you get the most recent ex-spouse. But no, Social Security does allow you to pick the higher of the two benefits. The key there is that they were married to each ex-spouse for at least 10 years, and there has been 2 years that has gone by since they were divorced. The next question was a sad case, definitely a sad case. The gentleman said he was diagnosed with cancer, had not yet claimed his Social Security benefit, was diagnosed with terminal cancer, single guy, and he said, hey, I should probably start my Social Security benefit right away. Is there anything I can do? And yes, once you turn full retirement age, you can go back to Social Security and ask for what's called a retroactive payment. So they will pay you back the last 6 months. And so if he's 68 today, they will give him a 6-month lump sum check and pay his benefit as if he started it at 67 and a half. So I would highly recommend that he do that. Now, this gentleman is single, so there's likely, if he was never married, there's not going to be a survivor benefit left over. Some people, even though their health will go downhill, they will want to delay their benefit, taking one for the team, so to speak, knowing that there's going to be a bigger survivor benefit left over for their spouse. But being single, in his case, it doesn't make sense. So he can go back. Once you hit full retirement age, you can go back to Social Security at any time and ask for a retroactive payment. And 6 months is as far as they will go back. So if you wait until 70 and you go, gosh, I'm having regrets, they will only go back and put you back to 69 and a half and then give you a 6-month retroactive check. This next question, this podcast listener is pretty clever. So what this listener said was, if they understand the 401k limits, what you can contribute to the 401k limit starting in 2025, if you're between the ages of 60 and 63, you can contribute $34,750 to your traditional 401k. That would reduce your taxable income. So this listener says, hypothetically, if you make $58,000 and you're 62 years old, you can collect your benefit and still be under the earnings test if you contribute, if you max out your 401k. So this person's saying $58,000 of earnings, you contribute $34,750 to your 401k. So that brings your income way down and you'll be under the $23,400 earnings test limit while they collect their Social Security benefit at 62. Unfortunately, it's gross income. So that $23,400 limit earnings test, that is gross income. So they would look at, even though you contributed, you maxed out the 401k for $34,750, they still look at gross income. Boy, it's a good thought though. I really like creative thinking like that. The next question was posed to us at a seminar that we did on Social Security a couple of weeks ago. And the person said, how do I pay zero taxes on my Social Security benefit? And I actually recently released a YouTube video on this, on minimizing the taxes you pay on your Social Security benefits. So Retirement Made Easy, if you look it up on YouTube, it'll go through a real life case study example to explain this whole concept of how you save money on taxes on your Social Security benefits. So I will direct you there. But in summary, most states, 41 of the 50 states, don't tax anybody's Social Security benefit. Okay, at the state level, we know it's tax-free for most people. And then at the federal level, for everybody, no matter who you are, at least 15% of your Social Security benefit will be tax-free. So another way of saying that is up to 85% of your Social Security benefit will be taxable. For some people, they'll pay zero taxes on their Social Security benefit. So how much of it's taxed is going to be somewhere between 0 and 85% of your Social Security benefit. It is income-based, and there's a formula that they came up with called provisional income. They have not changed the threshold limits on it since 1993. So for a lot of people, yeah, your Social Security will be taxable. But check out my YouTube video. It'll go into much, much more detail there. The next question, because so many people want to claim their Social Security benefit before their full retirement age, and they've all heard, oh, you can only make a small amount of money, $23,400, before they start penalizing you or reducing your Social Security check. And the question, is my pension going to reduce my Social Security check if my pension's greater than $23,400? So this is earned income. So when we're talking about the earnings test, that means employment income. Pension income is not employment income. IRA and 401k withdrawals, again, not employment income. Dividend income, same thing, is not counted towards that limit. We're talking about employment income. So if there's any reason to delay your Social Security, the fact that you have a pension above that limit, and I think there's probably a lot of people out there that are just not taught what kind of income is counted. It's employment income. It's from working. And I think a lot of people, they think, oh, my adjusted gross income is way above that limit, so I'm going to delay my Social Security benefit. We've got to be on the same page here. What type of income is counted? It's employment income. The next question is a very situational question. This lady was 65 years old. She had custody, full legal custody of her 10-year-old granddaughter, and wanted to know if her granddaughter would be entitled to a Social Security benefit based on the grandmother's earnings record. So the way it works is if the child's parents are deceased or disabled, or the grandmother has legally adopted the child, then the grandchild, the 10-year-old granddaughter, would be able to claim a Social Security benefit on the grandmother's earnings record. That was another good question. We run into that here and there. And the last question, this is a really good question. I'm going to spend a couple minutes on it, but met with somebody, and this has been a couple months ago, but they had an analysis and they were saying, we want to claim our Social Security benefits at 70. So those benefits are maximized and they're going to get the most possible income out of Social Security by waiting until 70. And in the meantime, they were going to retire at 62. So for 8 years, they were going to spend out of their 401ks. And as I looked at their figures and ran my own analysis, it seemed to me that, gosh, by both spouses waiting 8 years to start collecting Social Security, they were going to really spend through their 401ks, and there was going to be about $100,000 left. And their thinking was, at that point, then we'll just be able to live on our Social Security benefits, and then we'll have $100,000 on the side in a 401k that, we can use down the road. And my reaction to this was, okay, what if the scenario in your planning, what if it doesn't go right? So meaning you're assuming some type of return that you're going to get on your 401ks for those 8 years. What if you underperform? What if your investments in the 401k do lousy during those 8 years and you're spending through them? What that means is your returns are less than what you're assuming in your analysis, in your plan, and there's going to be less than $100,000 left in the 401k by the time you turn 70 and start your Social Security. And then at that point, you're what we call kind of cash poor. So yeah, you've got big Social Security checks coming in, but you're cash poor. So meaning any big expenses that come up, you just don't have the liquidity, you don't have the net worth or the portfolio size to be able to take care of any big expenses. You are truly at that point living on a fixed income, meaning Social Security. So that's the decision that they'll have to make, is to say, is that worth spending through all of our life savings to the point where, hey, by the time we start Social Security, there's only $100,000 left. And with no pension and just 2 Social Security checks. Oh, and by the way, they were not planning on working part-time at all during retirement. So past 62, there was no employment income either. So really the question here is, at the cost of what? Sure, everybody wants the biggest Social Security check possible, but what is that really going to cost us if we do wait until 70 here? Because we got to live on the money from somewhere. I hope this episode of the Retirement Made Easy podcast has been helpful. Again, I've been mentioning my YouTube video, Retirement Made Easy. I'd encourage you to check that out. I'll see you next time. And remember, always dream big.
Content in this material is for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. The content in this material does not necessarily reflect the views of LPL Financial. This is a hypothetical example and is not representative of any specific situation. Your results will vary. The hypothetical rates of return used do not reflect the deduction of fees and charges inherent to investing. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments might be appropriate for you, please consult your attorney, tax advisor, or financial planner prior to investing. This is a hypothetical example and is not representative of any specific investment. Your results may vary. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices mentioned are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. There is no guarantee that a diversified portfolio will enhance your overall returns or outperform a non-diversified portfolio. Diversification does not protect completely against market risk. All investing involves risk, including loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC. Traditional IRA account owners have considerations to make before performing a Roth IRA conversion. These primarily include income tax consequences on the converted amount in the year of conversion, withdrawal limitations from a Roth IRA, and income limitations for future contributions to a Roth IRA. In addition, if you are required to take a required minimum distribution, RMD, in the year you convert, you must do so before converting to a Roth IRA. This information is not intended to be a substitute for specific individualized tax advice. We suggest that you discuss your specific tax issues with a qualified tax advisor. Fixed and variable annuities are suitable for long-term investing, such as retirement investing. Gains from tax-deferred investments are taxed as ordinary income upon withdrawal. Guarantees are based on the claims paying ability of the issuing company. Withdrawals made prior to age 59.5 are subject to a 10% IRS penalty tax, and surrender charges may apply. Variable annuities are subject to market risk and may lose value. Riders are additional guarantee options that are available to an annuity or life insurance contract holder. While some riders are part of an existing contract, many others may carry additional fees, charges, and restrictions, and the policyholder should review their contract before purchasing. Traditional IRA account owners have considerations to make before performing a Roth IRA conversion. These primarily include income tax consequences on the converted amount in the year of conversion, withdrawal limitations from a Roth IRA, and income limitations for future contributions to a Roth IRA. In addition, if you are required to take a required minimum distribution, RMD, in the year you convert, you must do so before converting to a Roth IRA. This information is not intended to be a substitute for specific individualized tax advice. We suggest that you discuss your specific tax issues with a qualified tax advisor. Retire Strong Financial Advisors and LPL Financial are not endorsed by or affiliated with the United States Social Security Administration or any government agency. Retire Strong Financial Advisors and LPL Financial are not endorsed by or affiliated with the U.S. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services or any government agency.
Thank you for listening to the show today. Check us out at our website, retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. And if you want some help from Greg, submit your questions at the bottom of the page or sign up for a 30-minute retirement coaching session with Greg. We'll see you next week.